Hi there, I'm Christian, but my friends just call me Chris. And one day, I was forced to not only welcome my enemy's younger sister into my home, but I was also convinced to let her live there free of charge. Brian and I had always been at odds. Ever since he started his restaurant, he'd given me nothing but headaches. The restaurant began in my garage. We spent weeks and months of conceptualizing and making sure everything would flow smoothly when we did launch. Brian bankrolled the whole thing while I provided the ideas, tested the recipes, costed every menu item, and came up with our business model. I even designed our logos and drew up our marketing strategies. Brian was just as heavily invested in the idea as I was. But the thing was, he did not have a single clue how to do business. I had to do everything else. In essence, all he really brought to the table were the funds, and that made for a tense working relationship. See, Brian didn't feel like he was doing enough, and because of that, he felt the need to have more input in what was going on. And that was fine by me. But when his ideas began to head towards the realm of unsustainable, unprofitable ventures, I had to be able to say a firm no. Unfortunately, Brian did not take that so well. In his mind, what he wanted needed to be done. Because, as he said, it's my money. I did not agree. It was my work. And although he provided the funds, I was not his employee. I did not earn wages. I did the work for the sake of the partnership, for the sake of the budding business. And when our pop-up stalls around the city began to make profit, Brian became greedy. He wanted to do more, be more. He wanted to hike up our prices and do unrealistic menus to impress the critics. But no matter how much I cut the costs and ran the numbers, what he wanted just wasn't feasible. I told him if he kept going the direction he wanted, that our food stall would never see the day when it would become a fully fledged restaurant. And the deposit he paid into buying land for our intended venue would be for nothing. But Brian didn't listen. He was convinced our small success would continue. He was convinced that our food stall's momentum would keep going. He swore that our success and popularity would translate to a loyal following, and that would propel us to unprecedented profits. He was dead sure that our business wouldn't tank. But I wasn't. I knew the local market. I knew what they were like. And I knew that if we started changing more and going into more and more debt to fund his crazy ideas, every cent of the profit we'd made so far would only go into paying the banks back. And that soon enough, the public would lose interest in the food stall that charged exorbitant amounts for its ridiculous menu. We agreed to part ways, but Brian was sore about it. As I didn't get paid a cent, I of course took back all of the work I did for him. I left without giving him the recipes and handbooks I'd developed. If he wanted to continue on with the concept, he was going to have to buy it from me. It was good work, after all. And any work was worth money if someone was going to profit off of it. Brian had other ideas. He felt the work belonged to him. And so, he went around telling people I'd stolen from him. He told anyone who would listen that I had restricted access to my recipes, even though he'd paid me and had bankrolled the business. The fact was that my work was unrewarded. I did not even once, receive any compensation for the 6 months that I'd spent laboring day and night to perfect our little business. Unfortunately, because he was the one with the connections and money, everyone believed him. I was disregarded in the community. But I was undeterred and unbothered. Anyone who mattered to me knew what kind of person I was. And anyone who would believe a con man like Brian deserved to see for themselves what kind of sleazy, lying snake he was for themselves. Brian went forward with the business. For a couple more months, he conducted a few pop-up stalls around our city. People kept coming back because they expected to find my food, the food they'd grown to love and crave. But with every return customer that went to Brian's stalls, each one came away disappointed to learn that the food tasted leagues different from what they used to get. Slowly, they understood that Brian was lying, and that he did not know how to cook or run a business. I'd heard the profits of Brian's stall began to decline, and so he hiked up his prices even more. That turned off even more customers. But not to be discouraged, Brian still went along with building a restaurant on the plot of the land he bought. The expense was enormous. He wanted everything to be as high-end as possible, and the prices of the food reflected his expenses. Unfortunately, without my guidance or the guidance of a proper chef, the food did not live up to its prices, and more people avoided Brian's newly minted restaurant. When his restaurant completely tanked and his business crumbled under the weight of his debts, Brian blamed me. He told everyone again that it was my fault and that the business model I'd designed was designed for failure. Less people believed him that time, but still, some did. His sister Sammy saw it all unfold. She had been there since the beginning, supporting us and taking care of us whenever tensions rose and stress levels skyrocketed between her brother and I. That meant Sammy knew the truth. And although she'd kept quiet the whole time in support of her brother, when Brian badmouthed me for a second time, she was not having it. She confronted her brother one day. "Why won't you just quit?" she said to him. "You've run yourself and your business into the ground because you're too proud to admit that you don't have what it takes. You didn't listen to Chris, and your pride wouldn't let you listen to anyone's advice. He told you this would happen. Instead, you bite the hand that built your business, and to this day, you ruin his name. What kind of person are you?" Brian did not take that lightly. More than anything in the world, he despised disloyalty. And his own sister, siding with the guy who, in his mind, pushed him to the brink of bankruptcy, was the highest form of betrayal. "You've no idea what you're talking about!" Brian screamed at his sister. "You no-good, traitor, leech of a girl! How dare you! I feed you, I let you live in my house for free, so you can chase your stupid dreams of being a starving artist. And this is what I get in return? Pack your trash in a bag and leave. I don't need you. I don't need anyone. You're just a waste of space. You deserve to live in the streets." With that, Brian dragged his sister out of his house. He threw her belongings out with her. And before the night was over, Sammy was all alone, in the cold, with nowhere to go. With her dying phone battery, she called me. And although I had my reservations, I could not help anyone who was in that situation. Much more, someone I knew. I was skeptical at first. I thought it was once more one of Brian's plots. I resented that Sammy never said a word to defend me when Brian kept smearing my name to his friends. To be completely honest, I didn't like Sammy at all after everything happened. I thought we were friends, but the whole time, she never defended me. And that cut me deep. I didn't want her in my home, and so I told her she was only welcome to stay a night, and that the next morning she needed to find somewhere else. I heard her crying that night, though. As I lay in my bed and she lay outside on the couch, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. I felt like I had no choice in the matter, that throwing her out would make me no better than Brian, and if there was anyone I'd rather not be like, it was Brian. And so, despite my misgivings, I decided to let her stay. I soon found out, as we got to talking some more, that she had tried to defend me, and that Brian threatened her when she did. And as she did not want to be thrown out, she had to obey her brother. Sammy and I grew close as time passed, and when she'd lived with me for about a month, I decided to help her out with her art. I had enough money saved, and I felt, with her talent and my business savvy, we could start a good enterprise together. We started with a small Etsy shop where people could print her art anywhere they wanted. And because of the quality of her work and my tireless marketing, we eventually made good money. Our relationship blossomed as well. I began to date Sammy, and eventually, word of us dating and our budding successful business reached Brian. He was furious. One night, he banged on my door and demanded to be let in. "I nurtured your talent!" he yelled at his sister. "For years you did nothing but mooch off of me as I paid for your materials, and now you make a business out of it, and I don't even get as much as a thank you? So, you're claiming your sister's work now, too," I interjected. I'd had enough of Brian always claiming credit for other people's work. Brian shook a finger at me. "Don't you dare presume to insert yourself in something you're not a part of!" I could see the veins on his temples begin to throb, as if they would burst at any time. I wanted to give him a piece of my mind, but I didn't want to cause his heart attack. And knowing Brian, he'd blame all of it on me. Sammy, though, was done tolerating her brother. "Oh, shut up, Brian," she exclaimed. "Christian has as much say in this as anyone. He is a part of this." And then she flashed the engagement ring I gave her only a week prior. Brian went white, with anger, shock, or both. He stuttered through his words, unable to comprehend what had just happened. He shook his finger violently at us and said, You... Who... Why? And when he couldn't form a coherent thought, Sammy butted in. I want nothing to do with you from now on. We don't want anything to do with you. Now leave. Go before I call the cops. Not only did Sammy and I's relationship blossom further, our business did too. Eventually, we bought a house and started a family. We never talked to Brian again. I wish I could have rubbed our success at Brian's jealous face, but hearing that he spent his life trying to pay the mountain of debt he had was revenge enough for us.